And then one day, I was a kid who signed up and left to fight for his country. And when I returned, I carried with me the weight of forever wars and the struggle and the alienation that came with it. But I'm also a lucky one who found his way back, who found a living on the sea, in a home, in a community that offered love and redemption. Redemption is not just some simple or easy destination. It's a journey. I've made mistakes in my life, mistakes that I regret, that I live with, and that I continue to learn from. And I'm still far from perfect. But every day, I wake up and I try to be a little bit better and a little bit kinder than I was the day before. And if you give me the chance, I will be a senator for the people who cannot afford to buy a senator.
All right. Graham Blattner speaking to supporters last night after winning the Democratic Senate primary in Maine, despite a campaign that included a number of scandals. We're going to ask him about all of that and his high-stakes midterm matchup when he joins us later this hour. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Wednesday, June 10th. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have the co-host of our 9 a.m. hour, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, politics bureau chief and senior political columnist at Politico, Jonathan Martin, is with us. Columnist and associate editor at The Washington Post, David Ignatius, is with us as well, and he's here also because our top story, once again this morning, Joe, is Iran, a hot war that still seems hot.
Well, it does seem hot, and it's just important for us to keep a tally on things and keep a perspective on things. You look, first of all, at the fact that a year or so ago, when the United States bombed, when Donald Trump ordered the bombing of the nuclear facilities, any reporter that suggested to the president that those facilities had not been completely destroyed was called stupid, dumb, probably anti-American. Fast forward it to the beginning of this war, and what was the excuse? Oh, Iran's 2 weeks away from getting a nuclear weapon. So a year ago, people were stupid for asking you whether you completely destroyed it or not because you said you did. And then a year later, suddenly we have 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. And now we're seeing the same thing happening again, where we destroyed Iran's military. Remember, we kept hearing over and over again that we destroyed Iran's military, and again, reporters who questioned that were once again called stupid, dumb, hated America's military. Now we find out, again, from U.S. intel, that maybe 70% of their capabilities for missiles and weapons still intact there. And they're shooting down Apache helicopters. And so once again, reporters who were called stupid and dumb and anti-American actually were asking the right questions. And the president he can't bend the facts on the ground there. Speaking of bending the facts, the New York Times just dropped the first installation of what is going to be, I think, one of the most important books on the Trump presidency. Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, they now released a great detailing of officials scrambling and going into the Situation Room to handle a crisis that blew up before this war. That, of course, the Epstein files. So we're gonna be talking about that as well.
We've got a lot ahead, including the Graham Blattner of Maine, who's going to be joining us to talk about the general election ahead now. But first, the United States and Iran traded strikes this morning after the downing of an Army Apache helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran did not take responsibility for that action, but President Trump blamed the country for the downing, writing on social media, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. The president added the two pilots involved were safe and uninjured. CENTCOM says it responded by striking Iranian air defenses, ground control stations, and surveillance radar sites near the Strait of Hormuz. The Wall Street Journal, meanwhile, cites U.S. officials who say President Trump hadn't been convinced of the need to retaliate against Iran earlier yesterday, with the president telling the paper in a phone call it wasn't a big deal.
Wait, let's just stop right there. Willie, let's just stop right there. This is the same president of the United States who last week was saying, Iran's moving on nukes, when they were actually repeating the same thing that they've been saying for 50 years. And so now yesterday, mid-afternoon, this is just absolutely fascinating and frightening how desperate he is to get out of this war. Yesterday afternoon, he was saying it wasn't a big deal that the Islamic Republic of Iran shot down Apache helicopters.
Yeah, I mean, that was his initial response because he wants to turn the page so badly on this war. It's not a big deal. Let's not overreact to it. Then he puts out the True Social post saying, well, we have to react to it and respond. And they did respond. Even CENTCOM's reporting on what exactly happened here is still a little bit vague. They say perhaps an Iranian drone collided with the Apache helicopter. Most people think it probably was shot down and those pilots were bobbing in the water for some time before that drone boat, the American drone boat, could go pick them up. So again, it's just this fog of information that President Trump leaping to publicly make statements that end up not being true. And by end up, I mean an hour later being not true. Of course, it's a big deal that an Iranian drone likely shot down an American helicopter.
So in retaliation to the U.S. response, Iran's Revolutionary Guard said it attacked the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain and an airbase in Jordan. Bahrain reported warning sirens had been activated, urging residents to head to the nearest safe place, while Kuwait and Jordan said they had intercepted strikes.
So, David Ignatius, our allies in the region have been deeply concerned since this war began that this war that they did not want would end with Donald Trump striking a terrible deal. Over this past week, we've seen the desperation grow. And two things can be true at the same time. You can be against a war, like our Gulf allies were against the start of this war, but also be against the president stumbling out desperately and giving Iran extraordinary deals. I thought yesterday was the low point, though, when for a few short hours, he was saying it wasn't a big deal that the Iranians shot down our Apache helicopter.
So, Joe, our Gulf allies, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates in particular, said one thing clearly before the war started. They weren't sure this war was sensible, but if you start it, you got to finish it. And President Trump's problem is he seems unable to finish this. He says every day almost that he's on the verge of a deal. And then we have new reports of military action, as was the case yesterday. It's a war that he desperately wants out of, but doesn't seem to find yet an acceptable formula. I noted with interest the way in which CENTCOM forces seem to have responded to the attack on the Apache helicopter, which was a series of operations along the Persian Gulf coast near the Strait of Hormuz. And I can't help but think that they're beginning to shape what might be a possible series of deeper attacks if Iran doesn't finally come through with a deal that Trump wants. They're running out of options. They need to open the Strait of Hormuz. They've tried to do it through diplomacy, and that keeps failing. So at some point, they really do have to come to the point where they say, okay, we're going to have to open this by military force. That's the thing that CENTCOM has trained for years. I'm sure Admiral Cooper, the commander, has a very detailed battle plan. But you saw what may be shaping operations yesterday in strikes on radar facilities, other coastal facilities. But basically, again, this is a war Trump wants to end and can't seem to find a way to end yet.
Again, we found targets yesterday, Jonathan Lemire, that were operational and important strategic targets. Of course, you would have thought they would have all been destroyed. And as I've said repeatedly over the past 6, 7, 8 weeks, talking to a CIA analyst who was at on the Iran desk for years. He said, when I keep hearing the Pentagon saying, oh, we've destroyed 60, 70, 80% of their weapons capability, he goes, that's like body counts during the Vietnam War. They mean absolutely nothing. And they do mean nothing because Iran's military has not been destroyed, obviously. But we talk about timelines and we talk about the President of the United States. How many times has he said, oh, we're within a few days of a peace deal? President still saying that. J.D. Vance yesterday went on television and was actually far more realistic and said it may be months.
Yeah, first on the Iran's military capabilities, not only did we not get everything, that's clear, but Iran has used this ceasefire period to dig out some of its missile batteries that they had hidden or repaired some that had been damaged. There's no question that, though their supplies are down from where they were at the beginning of this conflict, they still have the ability to strike at their neighbors. And we have seen that in recent days during these tit-for-tat exchanges. And I think that we as in the media need to have a moratorium in believing at all any sort of timeline that President Trump puts on this war ending. There was a counting done the other day. It's been a couple of dozens of times, where Trump has said, yes, we're almost done. We're a couple days away. Maybe it's a week or so. And none of that has come to be, despite the breathless reporting around it. This is going to be tricky. Trump is clearly casting about desperately for a way out of this conflict. We saw the Truth Social post. He was reluctant to hit back. He makes that clear. He sort of had to be convinced into doing so, and he did, and it had to be done.
What if Barack Obama had been reluctant to hit? What if Barack Obama? What if Joe Biden? What if Jimmy Carter? What if Bill Clinton? Go down the list of Democratic presidents or Republican presidents. What would Donald Trump say of a Republican or a Democratic president that preceded him that saw the Islamic Republic of Iran shoot down an Apache helicopter over the strait, and then the U.S. president was saying, not a big deal. Maybe we don't need to go in. Maybe it was a mistake, which was the absolute nonsense the White House was feeding the press yesterday. Maybe it was a mistake.
Yeah, can you imagine what Trump himself would have said about Barack Hussein Obama refusing, in his words, refusing to hit back at Iran. And this comes after Trump tried to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, no, you can't respond to Iran's attacks on the Israeli homeland. Now, it's one thing for Trump to say to Netanyahu, hey, knock it off in Lebanon. Like, that's a problem for what we're trying to get here in terms of negotiations. That's one. That can be talked about. But to say that Israel would give up its ability to respond, to defend itself after being attacked from their home country from Iran is an entirely different matter. And it just shows, Joe, Mika, just how desperate Trump is to get the hostilities behind him, but he can't find a way out.
Well, and it's having devastating impact on Netanyahu's political fortunes in Israel. He is being destroyed politically from all sides inside of Israel because Donald Trump is going around saying Netanyahu does whatever I tell him to do. And so, these Israeli politicians are saying, OK, well, today is the first day for as long as Netanyahu is prime minister of Israel, that Israel will not be able to respond to Iranian attacks, which, again, he had no problem destroying Gaza, has no problem destroying half of Lebanon. But again, Donald Trump is ordering him not to strike back when Iran strikes Israel. And so now you have Netanyahu's government probably going down as well.
I think the challenge here for President Trump is it's one thing to not tell the truth about past elections.
Right.
As opposed to not being clear about an ongoing war that has a direct impact on the pocketbooks of the American people.
Right.
This war impacts the American people every single day when they get up to go fill their car with gas.
Well, and here's the thing. If the president, I was debating somebody this morning, actually, a progressive who was saying, oh, basically you're a warmonger because you don't want the United States to just run out of Iran as quickly as possible. I don't want Iran to control the straits, because if they control the Strait of Hormuz, then you're going to have working Americans who will be the ones who will suffer the most. They will be the ones who will be paying the highest gas prices. It's just like Afghanistan. Most Americans wanted us to get out of Afghanistan. There's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And right now, ignoring Apache helicopters being shot down and giving Iran control of the strait in a way that's going to hurt working Americans every day they go to fill up their gas tanks, that's the wrong way to do it.
And Americans are compelled to tune in and engage and understand what's happening with this war because of the fact that it impacts them on a daily basis. So they're watching much more closely. Even some of the president's most loyal media allies seem to express some frustrations with the ongoing war. Here's what Fox News hosts Laura Ingraham and Jesse Waters said yesterday on their programs.
One thing that a lot of Americans can't really wrap their heads around here is we keep hearing that they've been destroyed, decimated. The word is often used ungrammatically, but nevertheless, and yet
it's not 1 in 10.
Yeah, thank you. But we hear that, and we know there's extensive damage. Yet these drones are lethal, and they're easy to make. They're fairly cheap, and obviously did some major damage to us last night over Oman. How can we guard against that? How can we protect against that, given the stakes here, again, back home and over there?
Well, I think the Iranian military threat has been substantially degraded. It hasn't gone down to zero.
Why have we left any military structure there? I mean, again, I'm not an expert here, you are, but we seem to have hit a number of base points tonight and are still, perhaps. We knew where those were. Why did we leave any of them standing? If we wanted to just really get this done, why are they still standing at all?
The president indicated that he does not want to resume major combat operations. He said if we did do that, you'd have the strait closed for another 2 to 3 to 4 months. And he doesn't want that. And he keeps saying we're very close, we're days away. And I don't know what that means. We've heard that for a very long time. I mean, oil has gone down. It was closed at, I think, 89 today, but gas prices are very high. And there's a lot of people in the administration, I think, that would like to see the job finished. And others think that, you know, we're pretty close. But what do we know?
So the question is there, J. Mart, what does it mean to finish the job? How does this end? He says we're pretty close there. The Fox News host says there, but that's debated in the White House even, how close we are to being finished with this war. President Trump, he's right, would certainly like this war to be over. So what do you think is the impact domestically? Obviously, we've talked about gas prices, but you could almost hear it in the voices of the Fox News hosts there. An exhaustion with the war itself. What are we doing over there, and why are our pilots being shot down?
Well, and part of the frustration is that there has been, Willie, so much reporting about just how close we are to a deal. It's going to come literally in a matter of days, if not hours. I'm thinking about Memorial Day weekend, for example. And I think that's an instructive moment because this has happened repeatedly now, which is Trump's negotiators get close to at least a framework that can reopen the straits and move on to a broader negotiation about nuclear material and everything else. And then what happens? Well, the hawks immediately jump in and say, you're gonna be Obama. This is worse than Obama. And they know, because they know how to play Trump, that once you invoke the Obama card and you say this is worse than the Obama deal, those are the magic words that gets Trump to back off. And that's what happens. And I think that's a big part of the reason why, along with the Iranian recalcitrance, there hasn't even been a framework to reopen the straits, because Trump does not want to be called Obama. And the right wing in America knows they say Obama, that gets Trump to back off. So I think that's why there's no deal, and we're not close to a deal as we enter mid-June here. Politically, if you don't get to any kind of a deal and the straits stay close, it's very straightforward. Gas prices are going to keep going up, and that's going to increase Trump's political burden and the burden he puts on his candidates this fall.
David, this administration has had contempt for institutions from the very beginning, 2017. They've had contempt for history. They have had contempt for when you try to talk to them about diplomatic history, what went on before them, they act as if the world began the second they walked through the White House gates. Now, you and I both know a lot of arrogant administrations do that. This one was especially characterized by that. You and I, though, again, you've read much more and reported much more than I have, but just with my basic reading and following the news since 1979, I know, and Donald Trump should know, the weaker an American president looks, the stronger the Iranians get. The more desperate an American president looks for a deal, the tougher the Iranians get in negotiating that deal. They have been doing it since 1979. They humiliated Jimmy Carter, Chris Matthews, Dr. Brzezinski. I've heard them all talk about it repeatedly. They humiliated Ronald Reagan during the Iran-Contra crisis. This is what they do, and they're humiliating Donald Trump now. The more desperate he looks, the tougher they will get. And it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has everything to do with, well, this is just what Iranians do to American presidents.
You know, Joe, I've mentioned shopping for a carpet in Tehran. It's an experience many visitors have had. And it's just a fact. If you want to buy a carpet from a carpet dealer, the last thing you do is say, I like that red one over there, because you're going to pay double for it. You walk, I don't think so. I'm just not interested in the carpet today. And then maybe you'll get a good deal. And that's just a fact that anybody who knows bargaining with Iran is all about. My fear, Joe and Mika, is I've watched the president flailing now. The ceasefire began April 8. Is that he's beginning to think that he can define the situation however he wants. It was interesting in the strange non-interview with Kirsten Welker that he balked at even describing this as a war. It's sort of like Vladimir Putin continuing to say that he's fighting a special military operation in Ukraine. I mean, this isn't a war, it's an excursion, it's all kinds of things that Trump makes up to describe this predicament in which he's finding himself. Similarly, his comments about Bibi Netanyahu, he'll do whatever I want him to do, is the phrase. And that's now being repeated in Israeli television ads by his principal opponent, former Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot, over and over again. He'll do what I want him to do. In other words, the Israeli prime minister has no freedom because Donald Trump thinks he can just arbitrate how this is going to turn out. And so I think you can just see in President Trump's face that he's coming to the end of this. He's frustrated. He's furious. He's trying to dictate reality. And you know what? You can't.
Yes.
He can.
He cannot dictate reality.
He may think he's coming to the end of this. The Iranians will decide when we come to the end of this, whether it's with nuclear negotiations or whether it's with the Strait. And again, this is why, David, this is why so many other people that we've had on this show said, do not go into Iran. Iran is not Venezuela. I said it to the president personally. Iran is not Venezuela. He went in, and this is exactly what's happened. The Washington Post's David Ignatius, as always. Thank you. Mika, Ed Luce is coming on tomorrow, going to be talking about the parallels between.
Oh, boy.
He wrote the book on your father, but also on all the struggles that the Carter administration had trying to land a deal with the Iranians. Can't do it. Also, I just been looking through this Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan book release. That the Times put up at 6 a.m. this morning. Dan Boingo, Jonathan Lemire, Dan Boingo told people that the way the administration was handling the Epstein files would be Donald Trump's, quote, Iran-Contra. And J.D. Vance, Maggie and Jonathan are reporting, wanted everything out, even the unverified stuff. He said, get it out. Get everything out. If you don't do it that way, it'll end up costing you more. And just like with the Iran war, J.D. Vance obviously outvoted immediately.
Yeah, I'm actually reading through the piece right now as well. I just posted a few minutes ago. David Anshes, I swear I was listening to you. Also, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and it does paint this remarkable scene. Tremendous reporting from Maggie and Jonathan. We're all looking forward to the book out in a few weeks. In the Situation Room, as there is the Trump president himself not there, but J.D. Vance and all of his top aides are debating how to handle this. And the piece suggests this was far more paralyzing and deemed far more of a crisis at the time than was publicly known. Vance does indeed suggest putting everything out there. He also suggests that Tucker Carlson be given a chance to interview Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. That might clear the air, and that is voted down. They say instead Blanche could talk to her, which eventually does really happen, that he has that meeting with her at a prison. They also suggest the idea that perhaps Maxwell, would want something in return, a pardon. That was bandied about for a bit, but most of the president's political aides said, no, that would be a terrible idea and only fueled the conspiracies further. But it goes to, this shows that this is the Epstein matter. As we covered in real time on the show, was when Trump was really riding high last summer, and this was the first thing that kind of knocked him down a bit.
This is an excerpt from the new book just posted about an hour ago in the New York Times. It's going to be making a lot of news today. I mean, the bottom line in the reporting so far that we see in this piece, Joe and Mika, is that Donald Trump absolutely did not want to talk about this. He did not want the files released. This book paints a picture of J.D. Vance as the voice saying, we've got to get it out there. This is going to kill us with our base. It's going to kill us with young voters who think this is an appalling story, the Epstein affair, and it is, of course. And President Trump, time and again, snapping at people who even brought it up, and it became well known in the White House and continues to be today. You just don't mention the Epstein files around the President of the United States, which opens the question of why is he so defensive about this? Why is this now a subject that cannot be uttered in the White House?
Well, and
Okay,
it's
this
interesting. We were talking about this, as was the rest of the political world, every day up until the Friday when the war was launched. And for those that don't remember, there were some of the most salacious accusations on that Friday, looked like they were about to erupt. And then the war began. This has been put on hold. I suspect as soon as this war is over, it will start again. But certainly, Mika, this Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan book is an extraordinary book, and it's more than a lot of these presidential books on campaigns or on Donald Trump. It's not just one anecdote after another, one shocking bit of information after another. It really tells the story and digs down deep with, Maggie. If anybody knows Donald Trump better and has reported on Donald Trump more than Maggie Haberman at the New York Times, please give me your name and I will call you and we can talk, because Maggie knows, and Jonathan is just an extraordinary reporter.
Absolutely.
This book is going to be
blockbuster.
a must read.
Still ahead on Morning Joe. Perfect timing for this.